right, so welcome everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good day, wherever you are, and welcome to our continued conversation. Now we're jumping into chapter 2. I want to, before I even get into this conversation, I want to do something that I'm going to do every time we meet. And it's still for us to think intentionally about our learning, our unlearning, anything we are struggling with, questions we may have, and actions that we plan to do. And this is something I use a lot in my work, especially when I'm doing a series of workshops or a series of talks with the same group. Every time we come to the space, because that's how we are going to grow, I ask the participants, I ask myself, what am I learning? What am I unlearning? What am I struggling with? And I want to put an asterisk beside that one, because I don't want us to feel like these conversations that are brave, that are bold, that are courageous, whatever brand or name we want to call them, that they go so smooth that we go from step 1 to step 2 to chapter 1 to chapter 3, and then we're like finished and like, wow, that was good. That is not it. So if you are in a space where you are struggling with certain concepts, you are struggling with certain terminologies, you are having wanderings, you are feeling that level of discomfort, you're kind of not so sure, you are more curious, all of that is important. That is true learning. That is the dynamics of a learning space. And I want to make sure I emphasize that, because in the book, if you look in the book on, I think it's page 28, in your book, there's a statement from one of the authors that we cited, and it talks about the journey, and it talks about the learning journey happens on an individual, institutional, and community level. And it says something I love. It says, we are called upon to learn, to act, to grow, even when we are uncertain, afraid, not fully informed, and uncomfortable. So I want to kind of center that as we get into today's conversation, because I want us to realize that these topics are not just yay topics. They are strong topics. And sometimes many of us are at different stage of readiness for the conversation. So I really want us to be mindful of that. And so we get into chapter 2. We're talking some more about racism. We're talking some more about systematic racism, lots of different terminologies we need to kind of get into, and that you will extend on your own time, your own learning. But something I want you to also do as we grow into this process, do not depend on these two definitions. These are two of many. Use your own time to look at other definitions, other terminologies, how people are framing and phrasing some of these terminologies. So, in the book, we shared a few about anti-Black racism and anti-Indigenous and anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. And we went into transphobia, homophobia, ableism. But of course, this is only a sample, a few words. Right? I want us to be mindful that these are just a few that we pick, because, of course, a book can contain everything. Something we always think about when we write books, the number of feedback we get sometimes from publishers and reviewers of what is left out or what we should leave out. And I want you to hear what I just say. When we are writing books and chapters and articles, many times we get feedback from reviewers. We get feedback from publishers. We get feedback from persons who are just part of contributing, and they will ask, why is this left out? Why is this missing? Or could we include this? Or why are we including that? And oftentimes, I'm going to be very honest about this, oftentimes the answer is space, word count. And so anytime you read an article, a book, you kind of think, well, I wish they had put in this. And then another person, I wish they had included this. Oftentimes when we talk about homophobia, transphobia, or ableism, then somebody says, well, what about neurodivergence? What about mental health issues? What about issues of emotional disabilities? What about family structure? What about colorism? When we talk about racism, there are people say, what about colorism and shadism? What about nearness to whiteness? What about, I didn't see you use the term BIPOC. I didn't hear you use the word racialize. And so it's very intentional this morning, this afternoon, whenever you're reading this, whatever you're watching this, whatever you're engaging, that I make it very clear that, a glossary of terms, the use of terms, vocabulary, it's always important to add all words, add more words to your vocabulary. And so you can have those conversations. But today, in this segment, for the next maybe 20 minutes that we have, I want us to go to page 28, and I wanted to talk about practices of anti-racist educators. And I'm going to tell you this. We could delete the word anti-racist, and we could put practices of intentional, dedicated, hardworking, loving, caring educators. I want you to see what I just did. Because sometimes we get very stuck. If you notice, I've been saying that a lot because I see it happening around me. We get very stuck on a word. I had a beautiful conversation yesterday with leaders in another Catholic school board, principals and vice principals. And I think something that was profound that they related to or they reacted to was when I said to them, could I do this speech? And my speech was about belonging, which I do a lot, and equity, diversity, inclusion, and belonging. And I said to them, could I be able to do this entire keynote without using the word equity, inclusion, belonging for an entire hour? I said, absolutely. Because long before we were talking about anti-racist, equity, inclusion, belonging, exclusionary practices, safety, psychological safety, are the words that we are using. Long before that, we were rooted, many of you, your work was already rooted in kindness, caring, love, empathy, a very big one, grace, belonging, welcome, those kind of principles. And those are the same principles we're talking. That's why for me, I never get too charged up or too overwhelmed or too, deep into hooking onto a term. Because for us as educators, we don't get the privilege to just use a word and move on. I can tell you, many professors, many, politicians, many theorists, many persons who make their life speaking, they can use a lot of words and get away with just any word because a word is a word. You and I, we don't get to do that. As classroom teachers, we have to live into those words. We have to demonstrate because our students are watching us daily. And so you can say you care, but then do your actions say you care? You can say, well, this classroom is a safe environment, but are we modeling safety? We can say, well, everybody belongs. I've been to school and you see on the wall, everybody belongs here. Are the students feeling that sense of belonging through your action, your pedagogy, your practice, your modeling, your demonstration, your everyday walk as an educator? And so that's my focus. That's our focus. And if I should ask you a question to reflect on, I know the team will be giving us ideas and other opportunities to reflect as we go along. But if I should give you my reflection, I would say, what does all of these look like in my classroom on a daily basis? What does it look like in my classroom as I speak to my students? What am I expecting from my students when it comes to these practices? So when we talk about understanding yourself and others, how are we demonstrating that to our students? Do your students know who you are? Have you given them the opportunity to engage with who you are? Do you tell them stories about yourself as much as you demand to know about them? I always say to teachers, that September morning when you're doing the getting to know you activity, I said, make sure you include yourself. Tell them who you are. Tell them what's your favorite fruit. Tell them where you like to do, what movies you like, where you like to spend your time. They want to know you as much as you want to know them. And when we have an awareness of who we are, it's very important. I was having a conversation with a group of students, a group of Black students, as a matter of fact, and somebody, was sharing about the identity. And one person, I had to say to the class, remember that students in the class who are from Nigeria are different from the students who are from the Caribbean, and are different from the Black students who are born in Canada, and are different from students with different variants of identity. Because remember, we come from different spaces. So how are we honoring that? How are we honoring our Asian students? Like come from different spaces. I remember being in a school in the TDSB, and a school where a lot of Asian kids, were students, and the intentionality in which our principal reminded us as educators that all our students are not Chinese. Because we kind of saw that happening where we just make those assumptions about our students' identity. So I want us to be very mindful as we do this kind of work, as we engage in this kind of practice, to think about how we are getting to know our students intentionally and individually. How are we celebrating diversity? I'm going to stop sharing for the screen for a minute as I go into this conversation a little bit. How do we celebrate diversity? Think about celebration. I think sometimes, and I want you to listen to what I'm going to say, sometimes I feel like we overthink the work. I have seen a lot of times persons have come to me and say, Dr. Campbell, it's Black History Month, it's this, it's Indigenous, recognition, it's whatever. How do we celebrate? And I said, do not lose focus of the word celebrate. We have to cover the entire curriculum. We have to go into many of the stories. We have to do that. But when we think about celebrate, I want us to really be intentional about the joy, the identity, the joy, the identity, the joy, the identity that we are trying to encourage. Celebrate is a good time. A lot of times we make the same mistake, and I see this happen a lot, where somebody says, okay, we're going to do Black History Month, and then we're going to start from a deficit story. Let's begin here. How do we celebrate? If you're going to celebrate, we can't have an entire celebration when the entire focus is on these people disenfranchised. Let's start with a deficit. So let's think about how we celebrate our students. Let's think about how we make space in our curriculum and in our day for that celebration. Let's think about how we are doing that as educators. Let's think about that. Absolutely. Let's make sure, we think about that for a minute. So let me get back into the slides. And so we think about celebrating. The next one we think about as well is how we focus on learning about each other. We talked about that. But are we creating creative ways to do that? I remember years ago, potluck was a little bit bigger than it is now in many spaces. And you will learn about culture through food. I'm a foodie, so I love food, right? So when I go to a country, I just want to learn about their things, And let me give an example that just came to my mind. I love fish. I love eating fried fish. I love eating whole fried fish. And in Jamaica, we have a way of doing it. In Vietnam, I've seen it. I've experienced it more than once. A beautiful way. You go to a place like Colombia, they do it another way. You go to a place like Peru, they do it another way. I have gone to Ghana, they do it another way. There's so many ways to fry a fish and enjoy it. But I want to say something. How often have we seen students in our schools feeling embarrassed or scared about saying what their food is, what they eat, or what is in their lunchbox. I can tell you stories about that. That is why that book was so powerful. Don't Yuck My Yum. I don't even know if every one of you have seen this book, Don't Yuck My Yum, because I have seen it where certain children from certain culture, background, their food is looked at as, well, it's weird. And then it goes from yucky. And then we find a word like, oh, that looks nasty. I have had that experience with a group of students where with another student a lunch, and I had to have that conversation. How did we move from curious? Because it's okay to be curious. If you have never eaten something, you're supposed to go, what is that? You're supposed to do that. And we're supposed to allow students to do that, to ask questions, but teach them what's the proper way of doing it. So we can say, be curious. What is that? What is that made of? What part of the chicken is that? And you'd be like, wow, I don't eat that. And that is okay as well. But how do we move from that to go to, well, that looks yucky and that looks nasty? Imagine a child having that response to their lunch at school in your class. And this is real. And then we have students who go home and cry and said, I don't want to bring my lunch to school. Or we have students who are embarrassed or bullied about their lunch and they end up not eating their lunch. True story. Maybe some of you know these stories yourself. Some of you may have experienced this. So not because it's maybe not happening in your school, in your class. I want as educators for us to be aware that these things are happening in other spaces. Yeah, we have our children who have not eaten their lunch for days. And then we get to realize what's going on. They are being bullied. So how do we teach our students to appreciate, celebrate differences? This is not for me and you only. How do we trickle that down to our students? How do we celebrate each other? And begin with the images of each other that we are showing. Begin with the images of each other that we are showing. I'm intentional about this image because oftentimes we see someone with a certain disability and we go straight to deficit. And it's not even a blame. It's just how we have been wired. Well, if he's in a wheelchair, I'm not sure he can. I always tell my stories about going to a party. It's happened to me twice in my life, right in Canada here in Toronto, going to a party and I'm on the dance floor and somebody comes on the dance floor in a wheelchair. Twice I had that pleasure. Somebody comes on the dance floor in a wheelchair. What do you think my response was? How do you think I reacted? I just went straight to the idea that this is a dance floor. They're on the dance floor. I think they're here to dance, and I go over and I ask for a dance. I've done it twice. And I was offered a dance, and I lived my best life. I had a fun time. You should see me dancing at the back of the wheelchair, the front of the wheelchair. I was on the end of the wheelchair because for me, I already am wired that this person came to the place. So we not only include them, but they did leave feeling a sense of belonging. Because you can gather people, let this clear. You can gather people in the same spot. That doesn't necessarily mean they're being included. A group of students in a classroom don't necessarily mean they all feel a sense of belonging. You know that. I'm only here as a reminder. You know that. I know you know that. Don't think for a minute I'm not aware that you know that. But I want us to think, well, in my classroom, what can I do to ensure that feeling of belonging and safety is seen and felt? I hope you realize as I'm speaking, I am substituting words intentionally for anti-racist because I don't want us to be stuck on just one label, one title, one identifier, one indicator. Practices of an amazing educator. Practices of an inclusive educator. Practices of a kind and caring educator. Practice of a good educator. And when we say inclusion, we're talking about all areas. So examining your privilege and power as a person, especially as a leader, you know you have influence. You know you have impact. You know your students look up to you. You know your voice is powerful. I was preparing for this series. I was preparing for this very series. Some of you may have seen my posts on social media, and I was talking about preparing for the series, and something hit me. When I was, years ago, you would hear a parent say to a child, if something happens to you, go tell teacher. That was like a popular phrase. Parents still use it, but not as popular as I used to hear it as a younger teacher. If anything happens to you, go tell teacher. What is that about? It is about power. It is about leadership. It is about, as an educator, we carry that power with us. We have that. We hold that in our body. We hold that in our title. We hold that in our certification. We hold that in our position. When somebody comes to school and said, I would like to speak to the principal, I would like to speak to the director, I would like to speak to the superintendent, they're not speaking to you because they are wondering if you have any idea. They are coming directly to you because they know you have power. I'm telling you this. It may sound almost that they're coming to you with a level of aggression, but they're coming to you because they feel like you have the power. The buck stops with you. You know the answer. That's why they come to you in a certain way sometimes. How are we using that knowledge and that power to inform our parents, to calm our parents? I have a situation when a parent came to school because something happened, and I had to talk to that parent and spend an extra 5 minutes to say to the parent, let me give you the understanding of the big picture. In this class, we do this, we do that, we do this, we do that. And so they realize the dynamics. They realize that their child is a citizen in my grade 5-6 split. And there are 34 other citizens in that class. See what I just did there? Because I get it. When a parent comes to you, it's about their child. Their child is the only child. I get it. I get it. But I also remind them that I want you to remember this class is an entire organization. You know, your child is amazing, but your child is one of 35 amazing children in my class. And so the dynamics of how we work here have to think about community, sharing, kindness, process, procedure, structure. How are we sharing those power and privilege in our class? How are we allowing the child to get an opportunity to be seen as well? You know, I work at a school once where we had our end of month awards, which I'm a part of. I love it. And one day we had a meeting in that school, and we kind of check ourselves a little bit more. This was years ago. We check ourselves as educators, and we say to ourselves, the same students keep coming to the stage for awards, which they absolutely deserve. How can we extend the award and the recognition so that our students who are not the best math student, not the best reading student, not the best for the spelling competition, but the one who is best in other, best in other, best in other. How do we pull best in other? I just feel that in my body. How do we pull best in other? How do we highlight that child who is on the spectrum, maybe, who is not going to be best in this or best in that, but best in something else? And they're artists. There's a true story. One of my students who, they're not going to write for me, but when they express themselves through drawing, oh, it's magic. How do I highlight their magic? How do I allow them to know that Mr. Campbell see their magic as well. I see their magic. How are we doing that? And so we do that by unlearning some of the things that we do as educators. Oh yeah, I could tell you a story. I could tell you more than one stories about things that I did as a young teacher in 1995, 1998, 2000 that I thought was so amazing. And years after, I thought, that was really not good. But I was doing what I see other teachers do. I was thinking, well, that's what discipline looks like. And that's what A+ looks like. There's only one way for A+ to be. There's only one way you could give me an A+ work. Until I learned that's not true. I learned about multiple ways of expression and multiple ways of knowing and multiple ways of doing. And as an educator, I started changing my style. So if you check out my University of Toronto classes, a lot of my students will tell you that for their main assignment, sometimes I would give them 3 choices. And yes, it was some extra work for me, but it meant so much for my students that they had 3 different ways of expressing themselves to get a final grade in this particular course. I have had artists in my class who they are just artists. They are not going to write that 5,000 word essay like everybody else. But when they express the learning, the outcomes, it's powerful. So when I talk about equity, when I talk about inclusion, when I talk about belonging, I want you to realize, and this is not the first I'm going to do it, and this is not the last. I want you to realize I am going to bring in the curriculum and the pedagogy. This is not an add-on. I am going to center pedagogy and classroom practices in this series. So you realize, no, we're not here to talk about what's going on outside in the news, what's going on the streets alone. We're here to talk about classroom practices. So if anybody have the wrong idea about what the series is about, it is about how we excel as educators, how we ensure our students come to school and they thrive. This is a thriving series. If I had one of those dry erase something, I would just go back to the first page and we could just go back to the first page and we could just say, cross out this, cross out this. This is a thriving series. This is the thriving series. How do we ensure our students, all our students in our class, feel that sense of belonging and get to thrive and not just survive? So as educators, we don't get to stand aside and not be involved. We get to speak up. We get to speak up. Right? We get to advocate for those of our students who are marginalized. We get to listen to their voices. We get to listen to their voices. We get to ask them. I know it's a little bit tricky sometimes because I felt nervous. I remember, I used to work for a particular college and they used to have this practice. This is so important for me to share as I wrap up. They used to have this practice where they ask us to send the students. We have to design it ourselves, not the official college one. We have to design a midpoint review. Maybe about 3 questions. They always said 3 or 4 questions. And I remember how nervous I was when I had to send that to the students for them to anonymous. They had to do an online anonymous survey. One thing that is working, one thing that is not working, and one thing that you like me to change or one thing you like me to keep. I remember pressing that button and I go, because we are human and feedback can be, feedback can feel a certain way. Right? And I remember a student would say, hey, Mr. Campbell, hey, DR.ABC, Dr. Campbell, but especially years ago when I just came here, you speak very fast. Can you slow down? And over the years, I've learned to slow down. If you say, well, you still speak a little fast, DR.ABC, you're right. But I can tell you, it used to be faster. And my student said, hey, Mr. Campbell, slow down. Right? They love my class. My class was oversubscribed. So I didn't take that as an embarrassment or they don't like my class, because my class was oversubscribed. They chose my class and they would choose it again the next year and choose another course. How are we receiving those feedback? How are we talking to our students? And in closing, I have to remind us all that these are courageous conversations. Like I said at the beginning, so if you're struggling and feeling some level of discomfort with certain parts, this is not a fluffy conversation. It's not a fluffy series. It's the thriving series, but it's not a fluffy series. Let's reflect on these conversations. They are courageous. They are uncomfortable. And it's okay to be uncomfortable. And it's okay to be like, let me read some more before I respond. Let me think about this some more. But what we're going to do, what we're going to remember, like we in our part 1, is think about our own awareness, how authentic we are to the process, our continued practice that we need to change and adjust and grow, and the ones that are working that we need to just take care of and keep. I hope you listen to that. It's not just about unlearning and growing. Some of us, we have some strategies that are doing well. Keep it. You don't need to change it. Keep it. Nurture it. Water it. Share it. Share it with another teacher. That this is what works in my classroom. This is how I have this conversation. Let's expand and share those things. Think about our practice and our pedagogy as we do this work, and our positionality, who we are, because who we are impacts, influence, who we are impacts and influence how we lead. So that is it for this second part of our conversation. I hope you think about all the different things that we talked about. Sorry, there's a lot of stuff. You don't need to get all of it. You don't need to get all of it. In 30 minutes, that's a lot of stuff. And you're going to have opportunities to reflect on it, to talk about it. Let this be one of your staff room coffee conversation. Let's be one of the, I'm going to meet you at the door on a free period and chat about it some more. I love those days. Yeah, I think I told you, I was one of those teachers who, once I'm a free period, I am in somebody's class. I was famous for that. I am that teacher. Once it's a free period, I am at somebody's class. And yes, they love me coming to their class. And you said, Dr. Cameron said, when did you do your free period work? I did it at home. I like to do those kind of things at home. I did it at home. So when I'm at school, I go by the music teacher. She know I'm coming. She know I'm coming. She has chips in her drawer. She know I'm coming. And that's a part of the PowerPoint presentation as well. I want to leave you in that space where you realize it may be a heavy conversation, but I want you to never lose sight of the joy that is school. Education is joy. And that's why I was intentional in sharing that with you just now. That's a joy that keeps me going to another teacher's class and we connect and we talk, and I know I can go to her or go to him or go to them for something. Let's build that collegiality, because there are toolkits in your school that are amazing. I am not the one only sharing good stuff. The teacher next door has some good ideas. Check on it. Check on it. Have a wonderful day. Thank you so much for having me for this, and we'll talk again.